Okay, so I want to tell a little story about this guy I used to know named Chris. Christopher Alexander, aka Mr. Alexander, who happened to be the assistant principal of my high school, Half Hollow Hills High School West. And boy, this guy was something else, right? I mean, not only was he this iron fisted school administrator, I mean, we've all heard of these guys, right? Probably had one in school, at least some level of school. I mean, this guy was old school. He was tough as nails. He could have had a 30-year career as like an assistant principal administrator and never put up with shit from a student even once. And none of the kids ever thought of giving him shit because most of us were scared of him. There was just something really intimidating about the guy, and no one wanted to fuck with him or cross him. And most kids in school couldn't stand him, and they just hated this guy and probably wanted to fucking kill him, like secretly. And in 4 years, every time I heard people talk about Alexander, almost all of it was negative. Like, bro, I fucking hate Mr. Alexander. The guy's such a fucking douchebag, bro. Wish I could, like, punch that motherfucker in the face. Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. And, I will say, though, I'll give the guy credit. He was hard, but he was pretty fair, right? Yeah, like if you did get in trouble and end up in his office, the punishment would usually fit the crime. He wouldn't excessively punish any students or fuck with them excessively. Be pretty much an eye for an eye. And for some weird reason, even though he was an asshole to most kids, he liked me. I'll never understand. Still don't understand that to this day. But he was like super nice to me. Yeah, and I'd tell kids about that. I'd be like, bro, he probably likes you, yo. He's probably gay and like wants to fuck you in the ass. Better be careful. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe I'm just the one person he doesn't hate. That is possible. I don't think the guy is gay. But whatever. So I remember this one time, we had these things in school called agenda books. It was a list of school rules, and you'd write like notes and shit in it, and you had a schedule book, and you're supposed to have these on you all the time, and sometimes the teacher would even check you for it. And one day, one teacher found out I lost the agenda book, and then she tells me I gotta get it from Mr. Alexander's office, and even being like, a favorite of his, I was like, oh shit. You still get a little nervous walking into the lion's den. And if you're sure he's gonna bite you. And I walk in there, he's like, oh, hi, David. How you doing today? How can I help you, kid? And I explained to him that I lost the agenda book. And he goes, well, you know what? I think you might be in luck. Because I only have one agenda book left out of all of them. And you know what? I'm going to give it to you because you're special. I'm like, okay. Whatever you say, at least this guy doesn't hate me and make my life miserable. Could have that. Better than that. So, all right. So I take the agenda book. It's like, whatever. And I remember another time, this one was probably even better. After high school, right? It's 2004. If you've heard my Ava story, Ava Miller, the girl I dated in 2004 and 5, she was still in high school at the time. Remember, she was 16, and she went to high school west. She graduated with my brother, 2006, and she had to go for some after-school tutoring. So I drove her to school, and I kind of waited for her. And at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go outside and smoke or something. So I'm walking out of the building, and the teacher that was tutoring her at a certain point, she sees me in there and tells me, like, she realizes I'm not a student, and she asked me to leave the school. Like, you're not allowed to be in here. I'm like, whatever. Go outside anyways and wait for her. So I run into Mr. Alexander on the way out the front door. And he's nice to me like usual. He's like, hey, David, how are you? How's life since high school? You doing okay? I'm great, Mr. Alexander. And I just happened to mention the teacher that kicked me out of the school. And I'm like, oh, she said I have to sign in or something. And he goes, oh, you know what? You don't have to do that. And like doing like a pen, like waving it in the air. He goes, you're signed in by me. You can go back upstairs now if you want and join your girlfriend. And I'm like, wow, what a nice guy. Like I say, like an asshole to everyone else, but always nice to me. I don't know if you call that like a principal's pet, like a teacher's pet, but yeah, definitely cool. And but when I said like he's hard on students and like he's big on personal responsibility, he probably would get sued like nonstop today by all these snowflakes and their SJW parents. You know, like, you yelled at my daughter. Your daughter started a fight in the cafeteria. She started a food fight and like punched a teacher. So? I'm gonna sue you. You can't yell at her. Yeah, right. And probably making him want to quit his job today. Just making it impossible for him to be Mr. Alexander anymore, like he used to be. But anyways, so at the start of 11th grade, this would have been 2000, I noticed on the first couple days of school that literally every one of the freshmen in the freshman hallway wasn't locking their lockers. And not just for a few minutes. These fucking retards would leave these lockers unlocked overnight. Like, all of them. Like, fucking 200 locks. All open. And after a day or two, I'm like, let me fuck with these little morons. So at first I started out just doing like 1 or 2 locks. Like, I took them off and like switched them around. Then it was like 4 and 8 and 15. And before I know it, I'm staying after school just to switch every lock in the fucking hallway. I must have switched like 50 locks at a time. Holy shit. I was having too much fun. And then it must have got to the point where the school janitors were literally spending their entire shift walking around with bolt cutters, cutting off dozens of locks. They must have been so mad, right? Like, if I ever find out who the fuck is doing this and wasting my entire day, I'm gonna take these bolt cutters and smash their face in, right? You better not let me catch you, kid. And it got so bad, I did this for a couple weeks straight, like every day. It got to the point where kids were complaining to the school, including Mr. Alexander. And then finally it comes to a head. He has to get on the loudspeaker and announce to the entire school about it. I felt like such a badass, right? You know, that was like my gangster moment. And especially because no one knew I did it. And I'm sitting there just like laughing at myself in class. So he goes, okay, I've had a lot of freshman students coming to me saying that someone's been messing with the locks on their lockers, stealing them, switching them around, whatever. Well, you know what I have to say to that? If you're looking for sympathy from me, you ain't gonna get it. If you don't want anyone to steal your locks or switch them around, why don't you try locking them, you morons? He didn't say morons, but basically in nicer words. I don't care. Click. And now I'm just dying inside. I'm surprised I didn't have a fucking heart attack. He just dropped dead in class. And to this day, no one knows that was me. For some reason, I just never told anybody. But, yeah, that was Alexander for you. Yeah, and also, I gotta add, finally, we had this teacher named Mr. Cachetti. I think he was a social studies teacher. And this guy was one of the biggest he was like Alexander. He was one of the biggest assholes I ever had in school. But he was hard and fair, too. Same shit. And this guy would run detention. And he would literally take students out in the hallway and just punch them in his stomach. And you know he'd do it to big, strong kids like, you know, football players, basketball players that could take a punch. He wouldn't hit like a little kid or a girl. That would be crossing the line. He would have gotten big trouble. But he would take these 250-pound football players like Mike Bourne. You've heard that story, 330 pounds. And he'd be like, hey, Mike, come here, Mike. And this guy punched hard, right? He wasn't a big guy, but he's done some boxing or something. And Mike's like, oh, no. Come on, Bourne. Let's go. Let's go. And he'd take him out into the hall in front of everybody to show us, like, he could hit students in front of us and no one was going to say shit. I think we were too scared of him to snitch. But yeah. So he'd take him out of the hallway. Boom! And just like knock the fucking wind out of him. Even 300 pounds, he'd like double over. Because he knew how to like land a punch. A body punch. Oh, Mr. Crescetti, that hurt. Yeah, well, next time don't be such a smartass in detention. And honestly, I think kids did complain to Mr. Alexander, probably some of them. And I'm sure, knowing him, he's just like, what'd you do? Nothing, Mr. Alexander. That's not what I heard. I heard you were being a smartass to Mr. Crescetti and talking shit. Well, you know what? Maybe next time you keep your mouth shut in detention and he won't hit you. Get the fuck out of my office, kid. And yeah, that was basically him. So, yeah, that was my story about Mr. Alexander, my assistant principal at High School West. You know, badass, old school assistant principal, didn't give a shit. Stickler for personal responsibility. And even when people were stealing locks and switching them and driving the janitors insane, wasting hundreds of dollars worth of new locks, and teacher was punching kids in his stomach for shits and giggles, he still didn't give a fuck. What a guy. What a fucking guy.